Hey everybody. So first off, I want to say sorry for the delay in this video coming out. We are one day late from my usual upload schedule, and that's kind of twofold. This is kind of a crazy week for me. I'm about to go out of town for work, but really it's just because this video ended up being a little more complicated than I initially thought it was going to be. First of all, this video, as you can see from the thumbnail and the title, is essentially a review of David Robert Mitchell's film Under the Silver Lake, which is his follow-up to the movie It Follows, which was like a pretty popular kind of like hipster horror film from a couple of years back. I actually watched Under the Silver Lake for the first time a few months ago, like 5 months ago maybe, when it leaked onto the internet because I was really curious about it and I couldn't wait for it to be released theatrically. So I watched it that way, and I was really pretty crazy about it. I knew that it was a divisive film. A lot of people were probably going to hate it because it's just so indulgent, but I really dug it. I thought it was really cool. Now it's actually getting a real theatrical release in a few places in the country, and A24 is releasing it for video on demand. So I kind of wanted to review the film now that it's like for real coming out, but that necessitated me revisiting it, and in revisiting it, I realized some things about the film that I didn't notice the first time, and that kind of changed the trajectory of where I thought the video would go. It's also a little bit complicated for me because by the time you're watching this, this video is coming out on my personal Soberversary. I have been sober from drinking alcohol for 3 years now. This isn't going to be a whole video about sobriety necessarily. I'm not going to like go really deep into that, but suffice to say, up until about 3 years ago, through my entire adult life, I was a very, very heavy drinker. Anyone that knows me or knew me through that period of my life knew that I like to drink a lot, all the time. And that's just something I don't do anymore. Obviously, I'm not the picture of health without drinking in my life, but I definitely have changed somewhat for the better, I think, since quitting. I didn't go through any like 12-step program or anything. I didn't have a sponsor. I didn't go to like church. Like I didn't do most of the things that people do when they decide to get sober. I just had one Bud Light Lime-A-Rita Too Many one night, realized I should maybe take a break, and then through the process of doing that break, I was writing a feature article about Jake the Snake Roberts, the professional wrestler, who famously has struggled with alcohol and substance abuse problems his entire career and life. And in interviewing him for this piece and talking to him, you know, and watching the film The Resurrection of Jake Roberts, which is a very good movie you guys should check out, we talked about sobriety and stuff a little bit off the record, and I told him that at the time I'd been 3 months sober, and Jake the Snake Roberts, a wrestler I'd looked up to since I was a child, told me he was really proud of me. And that kind of made me think that, you know what, if this guy can quit drinking after years of like abusing his body and all this stuff and being estranged from his family, it shouldn't be that hard for me to do it. I've never really hit that kind of rock bottom. And I did. I stuck with it since then, and yeah, you know. But watching Under the Silver Lake reminded me so much of like my early 20s. I'm 32 now, and just everything about the film and the characters and the focus really reminded me of like being in my early 20s, drinking all the time, being kind of aimless, not knowing what to do with myself, just being clueless and wrong and just shit, just being kind of garbage. And I sort of wanted to revisit the film through that lens a little bit because I'm like, oh yeah, it kind of reminded me of like those days. This could be a cool opportunity. But then this time when I rewatched it, I thought about a different film just so much in watching it. I thought about Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which is probably my favorite movie of all time. Maybe it's kind of awkward to say it's like my favorite of all time, but I love it. I love the film. I love Shane Black. Shane Black's one of my favorite writers, my favorite filmmakers. And back in the days where I used to drink all the time, that film was just incredibly important to me. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang came out in like 2005, and I think the first time I watched it was maybe 6-8 months after it came out. I was pretty crazy about it. I bought it on like DVD and, you know, burned a hole in it, watching it all the time. Anytime like I'd invite friends over to drink, I'd make them watch it with me. And that was just like a pretty big thing. I'm pretty sure I was underage drinking at the time that I was watching it. Now that I remember, I was definitely like 19. And, you know, so throughout much of my like late teens, early 20s of being a person who drinks a lot, this movie was sort of a constant. Like I like to drink and then listen to music, drink at parties, drink at bars, but a lot of times I would drink and just watch movies. And one of the movies that I always watched when I drank that much was Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. And I watched it out of order, backwards, forwards. Anytime it was on Cinemax, there was a period of my life, which is a very unhealthy period of my life, where I was drinking like, I don't know, like multiple bottles of vodka a day. And during that period of time, Cinemax was also re-airing Kiss Kiss Bang Bang a lot. So that just became a thing. If, you know, I'd pour myself with a really big screwdriver and it would come on. It would already be in the middle of the film and I would just stick through it. So I've seen this movie a lot of times. One of the things I love about it is the particular way that Shane Black treats the detective genre. Shane Black as a filmmaker is a guy who came up and grew up reading old pulp novels from like the 40s on like the 70s, just all those books that have like Robert McGinnis covers, and like, you know, exactly the style of that kind of hard-boiled detective thing that he was obsessed with. One of the things he always said drew him to that genre, and what he loved about it was this sort of heroic element of the way the American private eye story works out. When Shane Black's The Nice Guys came out several years later, it was sort of an emotional and stylistic tonal follow-up to Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. It still was two guys, buddies, who were detectives in a genre story. But, you know, both films together really, I think, encapsulate the way Shane approaches the genre. There's an interview with him where he actually talked about his feelings on the genre that I think really spoke to, like, what I'm talking about here. Shane Black had said, I live for those moments when I catch a moment of being someone slightly better than me, when I step into something I didn't know I knew, or accidentally embody a character that I didn't know I had within me. I know that I won't always get those moments back, and I'll just go back to being the schmuck on the day-to-day level that I am, but the idea of working with a sense of knowing that no matter how low I go, no matter what rung of the ladder I sink to, that potentially there's a horizon which will still beckon, that there's still a mystery to life, and there's one more adventure that's sort of calling or waving its hand for me to come join. That's very important to me. I love the notion of this feckless sort of knight in tarnished armor who would love to fill the shoes of the legendary hero but just can't, and then find a moment when they do. And I love the idea that there's a myth waiting for each of us to occupy. So that was that. I never quite understood why I liked the way Shane Black approached the genre, but that quote really got me. It's the idea that he writes these characters who are just like regular kind of piece of shit people, just kind of going through their life and fucking up, and then because they have like the set of skills and they know how to solve mysteries and they have like the gumption, they find themselves embroiled in these really complex schemes, and through navigating this world, these good people and bad people and people double-crossing people and people murdering people and people hiding secrets, they end up like rising to the occasion and kind of making everything right with their own sort of like frontier justice way. And a lot of people approach the genre kind of like the Western, and there's sort of like this weird like the approach to the way the heroic idea of masculinity is kind of odd and sort of like self-serving, sort of like what I talked about in like the Dragged Across Concrete video, like the idea of like the cops and stuff. And I think that the way Shane Black does it is so different because the heroes in his stories are like kind of like slacker loser guys who have these moments where they finally get to be like the best version of themselves. You know, there's an idealism to it that you can kind of graft yourself onto. Like, if you're an early 20-something struggling wannabe screenwriter and you are drinking vodka more than you are water and you watch a movie like this, it's really easy to see how the iconography here can really mean something to you. You know, like I kind of related to these characters and the way this world worked out and just wanting to kind of wonder what it would be like to be a better, more heroic version of myself. It's always kind of stuck with me. It's not something you really see in, you know, it's not as prevalent in like Iron Man 3 or something like that, and you can barely see it at all in The Predator. But in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and The Nice Guys, it's really there. I've always loved detective stories and private eye stuff and noir, and those two movies are like that's it. This is like the sweet spot for me. It really makes me happy. The reason why is because it's gritty and it's dark and it's wry and ironic and it's funny and it's kind of acidic at times, but underneath all that, there's this kind of Amblin-esque, you know, aspirational quality to it. It really makes you feel like you could be someone more, you know, someone better, you know. When I watched Under the Silver Lake, though, I didn't feel that. I liked it still. I was pretty into it. I thought it was an interesting movie, but I realized it's a very different approach to the detective genre. It's something that I think is actually a little bit more honest, even though it's not more enjoyable, so to speak. So let's get into it. Under the Silver Lake is a film noir, but like inverted. It's not about an actual detective. It's not about an actual like murder mystery and stuff. It's about this dude Sam, played by Andrew Garfield, who lives in Silver Lake in California, around 2011-ish. It kind of seems like that's kind of when this movie is happening. It's never like explicitly stated, I don't think. The movie's like 2.5 hours long, but the general gist of it is that Sam's a slacker. He doesn't have a real job. He bonds with this young woman who lives like across his apartment complex, and they have like this really kind of great afternoon together once, and then they're supposed to hang out the next day, and then she disappears. She moves out. So the whole movie just kind of becomes Sam trying to hunt her down and figure out what happened to her. But it's also about like 30,000 other things. David Robert Mitchell's script for this movie is like, I found the script online before the movie came out. I didn't even bother reading it because it was like 200 pages. It was just this insane tome. I have no idea how you put this in a producer's hands and they go, yeah, let's spend a few $1 million on this. Like, it's absurd. Anyone would look at this and go, can you cut this down please. And the movie itself is so indulgent. Even though the film actually focuses on Sam's search for Sarah, the sort of femme fatale character played by Riley Keough, he goes on all these different tangents throughout the story. And the tangents get further and further away from the plot in a way where you're like, there's literally no way they're all going to congeal back into the central mystery. It sort of takes like the way Raymond Chandler used to write novels and sort of the way like The Big Sleep is, where the plot is just so complicated and convoluted that it becomes almost a joke. But it keeps going beyond that. There are so many moments in the film where I was like, okay, they've officially introduced enough red herrings and enough color and enough background stuff. Now they're going to get down to like actually advancing the plot. And like it feels like it's never going to happen. They just keep piling on more and more stuff. There's just so much. It's not just that Sam's trying to find this girl who's missing. It's also there's like a dog killer on the loose. It's also that there's this like weird underground zine about Silver Lake that hints at all these different strange like happenings that are going on. Some are conspiracy theories, some are just rumors, some are maybe genuine true crime happenings. It's also that there's just all these different seedy characters. There's like a guy who looks like Father John Misty, but he's a pirate. There's like this weird band, and they sort of look and sound like a band that would have played the Bronze on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. There's just all these weird characters and men and women and stuff, and all of it kind of comes through Sam's perspective. And Sam is like this drunk, slacker, piece of shit 20-something. So like all he really kind of pays attention to is like popular culture and like trying to get laid. And like anything in between that would be like real observations a detective might make is just non-existent. It basically feels like a detective story for like the modern sort of like post-millennial young man. Something that came up when I was talking to friends and stuff about the video I made about Us, where I talked about why I don't like scavenger hunt pop culture, and I don't like things that seem like they're designed to be picked apart by Redditors. I love mysteries. I love stories about mysteries. I love stories of mysteries being solved. But when a piece of pop culture like just is a mystery, like its whole thing is just like a puzzle box, I tend to get annoyed and I think it's stupid and I don't like it. And I think part of the reason why I don't get into that sort of thing is I don't like it when that weird impulse that you have, that like a lot of, I think, young nerdy guys are told that like all the pop cultural stuff they love matters so much, like the sense that there's all these connections and that like cutting yourself off from society and only looking for those connections is like healthy. I don't like things that promote that and like make that seem like it's worthwhile. I don't like giving those people sort of like an endpoint that's like, see, it is okay that I spent all this time on a message board, not talking to humans, not relating to people, understanding them, obsessing over pop culture minutia. I think that is like fucked up and weird. And Under the Silver Lake, as much as early reviews for the film seemed to imply that it was like this misogynistic, weird, indulgent bullshit movie, like just navel-gazing garbage, I feel like it's at its core a movie that is like giving that kind of person what they want while just completely lambasting them. And maybe I'm reading into this. Maybe that's not what David Robert Mitchell's actual goal was. But watching the film a second time, I just kept thinking about how fucking stupid Sam looks and seems through the whole movie, and how it just shows these like bursts of rage and this weird insular self-obsession and stuff, and like it shows it completely nakedly. Like it never really takes the time to make him seem relatable and likable. He basically is the ideal viewer for this movie. Like, I'm pretty sure when you're making this kind of movie like this, you want a guy who's like Sam to watch it. The thing is, I think those people relate to Sam so much that when they're watching it, they don't realize this movie is just like owning them at every turn. He's just this sad, like pathetic dude who isn't doing anything with his life for anyone or anyone else. He doesn't understand like why women don't seem to connect with him, even though he has multiple women who like are drawn to him in this movie for whatever reason. He can't really keep them around. He doesn't understand why he's not doing more, and he doesn't seem to understand why, you know, holding up in your house with an issue of Nintendo Power and looking at it with a map laid over it, trying to figure out hidden parts of the city is like bullshit. It just seems normal to him.
Oh, you think that's weird?
A little.
And I think it's going to seem normal to a lot of guys that watch this movie and sort of think like, oh, that's me. Like, you know, those like fucking Facebook memes for like film nerds where it's like a guy going, oh, that's me. And then you see like Ryan Gosling in Drive and it's like, why would you think that's you? Like, you're nothing like that person. These guys are a lot like Sam. And parts of me were like Sam too. And maybe, unfortunately, some parts still are. But the way that this film uses like the visual and oral iconography of film noir, like the score is just like, it just swells constantly to the point that it's like hilarious. Like there are music cues where you're like, this is too much. This is too operatic and interesting for a story this bland. Or the cinematography from Michael Giacchino, who also Michael Giacchino, who also was a cinematographer for Us and other films recently. He's got like a pretty good eye. It's just such a lush looking and feeling movie, but it's all this stuff about this like bullshit story, you know? And I like that about it. It makes it feel more, I don't know, it creates this dissonance between, like, what you know the story is, like this loser guy looking for a girl that, like, barely knows who the hell he is. But it's set against this backdrop of all these influences and inspirations and stuff that make it feel grander than it truly is. The fact that the story ultimately ends up proving his character right seems ridiculous, because without going into any spoilers, like, the third act of the movie does sort of pull it all together, even though it seems like it's not gonna. It pulls it all together in this way that's, like, it's comical. I've seen criticisms of the film that say how, like, the movie seems to be saying that, like, Hollywood is just this, like, sinful place that spits up women and chews them out, and that they need, like, a white knight like Sam to save them. And I don't think the movie is saying that. I think that's, like, how Sam sees the world. And I feel like the movie is trying to say that if you keep piecing together puzzles and you treat everything like some kind of symbology that's, like, there, like, the secret way of the world, if you dig long enough, you convince yourself, you will find a conclusion that speaks to your inherent bias. I feel like Sam as a character feels this way about the world, feels this way about life, and then he goes through all this weird, ridiculous, repetitive shit to get to the end of the mystery, and we get to the end of the tunnel. It basically just kind of tells him that he's right, that, like, rich people really run the world. That part's true. That's not really, I'm not gonna argue with that. But that, like, there's all these dudes that have money and they're keeping all the women away from you, and, like, they're hiding it from you. Like, it really kind of delves into some kind of weird incel territory. But it plays right. You know what I mean? Like, it's like maybe he needed this fucking... I think that the ending doesn't quite work as well, if only because he doesn't, like, learn from it. It's not like it gives him any kind of growth or anything like that. But I do think that it makes sense. It feels internally true that it actually gets to this point and all this stuff kind of tumbles together in this weird, like, just, like, loser beta guys, like, torn fantasy of how the world works. I mean, this is a movie where at some point Sam meets, like, an evil songwriter who's, like, written, like, every famous song ever, apparently, and, like, he's been putting in, like, secret symbols into the songs for people like Sam to, like, learn about the real way the world works. But the actual sequence is, like, fun and crazy and over the top as it is basically like a menacing Quentin Tarantino version of the 4 Chords of Awesome song.
It's all silly and it's all meaningless. I created so many of the things that you care about. The songs that give your life purpose and joy. When you were 15 and rebelling, you were rebelling to my music. Uh-oh. That's one you know.
I'd go wherever you will go.
Like that song where, like, they show that every song that has 4 chords in it kind of is the same song. It's like, this is the kind of movie that is. This is a movie that takes something that corny that you've seen on YouTube a million times and turns it into, like, this traumatic climax. You know, it's strange. It's an interesting subversion of what I typically enjoy from the detective genre. I like, usually, this idea that you can be better than you are, and you can actually make some change in the world, given that a bunch of convoluted pulp style, you know, plot mechanics, like, push you in that direction, right? Like, it's like, if I'm just waiting for the right day. You know, it kind of reminds me, like, in Snow Crash, when they're talking about how, like, every young man sort of still holds on to the belief that, like, with enough prep and enough time and, like, he can get abs and a samurai sword and be, like, the badass version of himself. It kind of speaks to that same kind of impulse, I think. Whereas Under the Silver Lake offers this, like, complete counterpoint, which is just like, hey, you're a piece of shit, and if you keep going down the same path, you're just going to prove yourself right and think that you're not, and you are, and, like, anyone else can see it except you. Maybe that's not the actual intended theme of Under the Silver Lake, but having watched it twice now, that's what I got out of it. I got out of it that this is like a long, indulgent, stylized, weird film noir about, like, just how dumb and, like, shitty young men can be. The way Shane Black, I think, offers a counterpoint of how you can be better, David Robert Mitchell's just like, no, this is just you. This is a mirror. You know, noir is supposed to hold up, like, a cracked mirror to society and show you, like, a different version of yourself, and this is just, like, a straight-up mirror, like a regular mirror. It's like, here's you, agonizing over the Transformers and shit. This is who you are. I don't know. I know a lot of people might not want to watch it because they think it's going to be too weird and too indulgent and too, like, much of a dumb hipster guy movie. But I think that if you watch it with that lens, it's actually a very interesting movie, even if you don't relate to that kind of weird type of guy and you do want to know, like, how the strange insides of their minds work. And also, like I said, great score, beautiful cinematography, A lot of really funny moments and stuff. A little too long, but definitely worth checking out now that A24 is finally putting it out for people to really watch. That's it for me. So thank you guys again for waiting for this video. If you guys have if you've seen Under the Silver Lake or want to talk about Shane Black at all in the comments, please feel free to. I love Shane Black and this movie is cool. I did just get back from seeing Avengers Endgame, so do look out on Friday for a bonus video after this about that film. I'm going to just review it on the channel since I saw it early, and like people probably want to talk about it. It's like the biggest thing happening this year apparently, so yeah. Alright, thanks guys. If you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. If you haven't, hit the little notification bell to be notified when new videos drop. Do that too. And thanks.